Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Black Op Radio. This is your host, Leno Sanek. Today we're speaking to a very well-known, famous film director, Igor Lopatonok. And hello, Igor. Thank you so much for taking time today.
Hi, Len. Thank you for having me. It's a big pleasure for me.
Your two big films that I know of, Ukraine on Fire, 2016, Revealing Ukraine, 2019. Now we're in the year 2022, and it seems all the things you were talking about, worried about, revealing, come to a real head. And that's why I'm having you on now, because I can't really get over or just get settled the amount of disinformation, the press calling for war, and everyone saying, I stand with Ukraine, I stand with Ukraine. Then I say to them, well, Western Ukraine or Eastern Ukraine, right? Which party are you standing for? And then they got a blank in their face. They only know that on the news they've said, Russia has attacked, poor Ukraine did nothing. And then, so first of all, I have about 20 questions here to go through that will reveal this. Your films, a little bit of controversy because they were on YouTube, then they got pulled. They were on for years, and all of a sudden, because of whatever reason, they got pulled from YouTube. I think you moved them to Rumble. Is that correct?
Yes, we was banned on YouTube and censored and deleted. We fight back. They restore our film, but they restrict it. And after that, we was banned and deleted from Vimeo. It's another video sharing platform, much lower size than the YouTube. And yeah, we under the censorship. Now we was shadow banned even on the Amazon for quite a time. Now it's a little bit better because the people in a huge demand of the film, even a big tech cannot censor us completely. And you know what? I'm very thankful for the whole audience, to my people who listen to what we discussing open on the Twitter, and thanks to Glenn Greenwald, it's go very public. And people start, I give them permission to download and re-upload the video everywhere when they can. And the YouTube is saturated, Odyssey, Rumbler. Thanks to Rumbler, we got like a 2,700,000 views for just less than 2 weeks, 10 days.
Well, just before we get into that, then, you work in film. You worked in film for years. So before we get into these two films, just give me like 1 minute, a brief background of your interest in films and making documentaries and working on major releases. You were born in Ukraine.
Yeah. I was born in Ukraine in 1968 when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, USSR. I work in a big business, banking, investment. 2005, I was so bored out of making money like in a treadmill. I shifted to making the movies 2005. I moved to United States 2008. From this time, I made more than 30 projects and meet Oliver Stone 2013. And we did 4 films with him. I was executive producer for Snowden, his movie what he directed. We did 3 major documentary together. When I was the director and he was the executive producer, and he conduct all interviews for us, and he also helped us with a final cut, and he has a approval rights for that film. So when you're talking about the films, yes, I directed that film, but you can call it Oliver film because his hand was on my shoulder and on every frame of that all 3 films.
Right, but I was surprised to find that you worked on Snowden, and I didn't know that. The reason for me talking to you and helping to promote your good work was that, if I didn't hear about it, I'm sure a lot of other people didn't know that. And I think that people had heard about Ukraine on Fire, just heard about it. But now, because it's such an important thing, it could lead to a real catastrophe. That's why I'm urging people to watch your film, because whatever we talk about today, we'll say, well, this is something of interest, but you watch it and it's as a documentary, a real education that there are 2 sides to the story, maybe 3, because, let me just ask you this. For the 2013 era, when you met Oliver Stone, you made Ukraine on Fire in 2016. So this is after the coup of 2014 to 2015, the problems in Ukraine. And what was a catalyst that you thought, I'm going to capture this on film and present it to the world? Because not too many other people did.
Yeah, that is a good idea. This is a good idea to tell story how Oliver helped to make that film happen. So in 2013, right before the coup, we understand what's something going to happen. We don't know what, but we was prepping to make a big, major documentary about Ukraine and all controversy in this Ukrainian internal politics. And we start working on this. We come to Oliver because we looking for the big name to land on the project. We are considering, my partner's considering Michael Moore. It's a out of a picture idea, and Werner Herzog. And after we come to Oliver, he said, "Oh, it's such a mess. Ukrainian politics is everything mixed. The interest of Ukraine, Russia, United States, and the oligarchs, and all that's in a big mess." But okay, I'm curious, and but you need to find a good director. And in the 1 month, he tell me, you know what? Is no one who you can find can tell that story as you, because you're Ukrainian and you producer, so let's go, direct it. I said, oh, Oliver, I'm so worried about this. He said, don't worry, the first film, you will do that. And, you know, I listened to him. I did everything what I believe I'm doing right. And okay, in 1 year, when we present him at our version of rough cut film, he looked on this and he was very sad and upset. He practically throw in the trash can our cut. But he asked us tomorrow in a cutting room together with my editor, Alexis Chavez, and we sit for the 4 hours and we cut 30 minutes of the film as it is now. And as I understand that Oliver, it's a big man and it's a big director with understanding how to make the story clear, how to tell the story straight to the audience. So yeah, that Ukrainian subject is very, very engaging audience now because it's touching now to everyone. In 2016, when we released it, that was a kind of regional problem. But we start talking about all the danger of big war in the first film, and in the second, especially our ending, is all dedicated to the stop, please. We're trying very hard to explain you this is a dangerous course, because if we follow the steps in this course, sooner or later we will have the final confrontation with Russia. And Russia is a nuclear superpower. And after that, we don't know what's going to happen next. So this is why I believe now we everywhere, because now finally people who endangered by Ukrainian situation, they start to try to find out what is really happening in Ukraine.
Well, I think it was called, if not in your film, with some interview you did, a resource war, really, because they're battling over the resources. You know, if you look at the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, where one government, they lend government so much money, and then they say we're going to have some interest payments, and then the next government comes in and they say, you have to get this austerity. You're going to have to raise the gas rates, raise rates of everyone in the Ukraine to pay us back. Then those guys don't do that. Then they're kicked out. And then the country has just, the resources are taken out. I think in Oliver is one of his interviews on there. I'm not sure which one it was. I'm probably revealing Ukraine. The gentleman he's talking to says, look, it's Wall Street. They have orchestrated this. It's not some Ukrainian faction against one or the other. It's external forces lighting this powder keg.
Yes, that Viktor Medvedchuk, who was the leader of Ukrainian opposition, in 2019 for our sequel, he's outlined how it was happened in the Ukraine. But you know, Len, I need to tell, if Ukraine as a source of the money or resources or something doesn't have such an importance for the United States. Biggest importance for the United States, this is a big country with a huge population. It was 55 million when that was Soviet Union collapsed. Now it's smaller, and this country has a big border with Russia, and there's a weak chain in the Soviet Union. The community of republic was emerged after 1991. So the biggest goal to subvert Ukraine was an ability to make Ukraine, to produce from Ukraine anti-Russia, and fight Russia with the Russian people, are practically one nation. We call them Ukrainians. They're very similar. This is an existing theory. This Russians unbeatable, as only Russians can beat Russians. This is why organizing the civil war first in Ukraine and after that brainwashing Ukrainians and making them fight Russians, that's like the tactic of the proxy war against Russia. And that tactic play very well. Unfortunately, we see how, and its tactic is also play very well with the Western audience, because they using Ukrainian flag, they saying we stand with Ukraine. Nobody know about complexity of the Ukrainian situation. Nobody know. Everybody calling Russia as aggressor, and everybody like a sheep in a herd. They following the steps to the cliff. Oh, I'm sad about this, but this is our reality.
Yeah, the thing that is so surprising, that of even friends of mine that know I'm into political intrigue, that 99-1 they just think that Ukraine was attacked for no reason by Putin right now, and the world would be better off without Putin. And there's not one word of, and if this number may be inflated, 13,000, 14,000, but after 2014, Western Ukraine attacked the Donbass region. There is bombings and civil war there, 14,000 people killed since then. Would you agree with that number of 14,000?
Yes, the 14,000 civilians approximately was killed, and 500 of them was kids.
And when I looked on the internet, you can find these memorials to children killed, either small schools or whatever. I think your memorials, 30, 40, 50. There's these statues and memorials, and not one word in the Western press. I mean, not one word.
Not one word, and that's happened for the 8 years. To understand the magnitude of these 8 years of civil war in Ukraine, you can compare it to the World War II, for what's going on for the 6 years, or in Russia it was the 4 years of under the pressure from Nazi Germany and the occupation and the liberation after. So for the 8 years, the biggest country in Europe, and Ukraine is the biggest country in the European subcontinent, and they was using every possible heavy hardware, military hardware, to kill their own people. Artillery, tanks, air forces, everything. And you know what? And imagine how we, as a West, trying to just avoid it, just don't mention it, just do not say any words about who. And you know what? Also strange, very strange, but very dangerous tendency that there's nobody mentioning real Nazi who is in Ukraine, who is emerged from the grassroots of Ukrainian nationalist movement to the Ukrainian nationalist radical movement, and they openly praising collaborators with the Nazi regime such as Stepan Bandera and others. And that was a ruthless people. They're responsible for genocide in Ukraine during the World War II. They openly collaborate with the Nazi regime of Nazi Germany. They form entire divisions of SS, like special forces of Waffen-SS, of the cleansing battalions of Nazi who's marching through Ukraine and Belarus and Russia and killing the people. In a way, what's real German Nazi was scared of their brutality and the reign of terror what they learned on their own people. Now that people, and you know what? How sad for me to see that the colors of their flag, what is actually soil and blood, it's a red and black color. I see that color of these flags in my Santa Monica here in Los Angeles. It's making me sick to my stomach, because the people who don't understand the history, people who don't understand whom they support, they openly start supporting, and they believe they doing something for good. They believe in they supporting the people who's fighting against the Putin aggression. And they don't realize most important things. That war was started not on the 24th of February this year, 2022. That started in March of 2014, 8 years ago. This is how that war coming to the end. This is how the Russian people sacrificed their life to clean that mess, to clean that scam out of the surface of Earth. And they're not fighting against civilians. That's all. That's all bullshit and propaganda. Even Ukrainians who fled Ukraine tell me, thanks God, the Russian army do not fighting with civilians. But on the opposite side, the Ukrainian nationalist battalion use the civilians in the big cities as a human shield. Exactly same tactics what ISIS was deployed in Syria, in Aleppo and other cities.
Well, look, you go through this in the first 20 minutes of Ukraine on Fire, the real history. And I would go further. You mentioned they were collaborating with, but I think it's more endorsing these one of them's called Right Wing, right?
Yes.
And Trident. And you have to watch your documentary. I urge everyone to. You get a history lesson, and then you'll be up to date. But the thing that is so amazing is that now the press in 99-1. I mean, I think there's like you mentioned, Glenn Greenwald. There's Jimmy Dore, and there's Russell Brand even saying the real trouble with the narrative. The narrative is there has been a civil war, but it has been people pop up. I mean, I know I'm jumping around a bit, but I was just amazed. I didn't know some of this history. I didn't know about the president or premier of Georgia gets kicked out of there, has to flee the country in the middle of the night kind of thing. And now he's propped up as a major figure in Ukraine. I mean, it's when you start to watch this, you go, boy, how, I've been asleep about this for a long time. Now, I live in Vancouver, Canada, so I can't be aware of everything in the world. But because this could start World War III or something, I better get up to date and get educated about it. That's the good thing about your two films. Now, you mentioned 4, so I know of Ukraine.
Let me tell you. So we have 2 big films with Oliver Stone about the Ukrainian subject. We did a prequel before we start Ukraine on Fire, what's dedicated to that coup d'etat in 2014, and dedicated only for the 3 days of this coup d'etat when around 49 protesters was killed, and the government forces and the police was blamed to kill them. They called that event Maidan Massacre in Kiev. That happened on 18th of February and 20th of February in 2014. We did like a little investigative 1-hour film when we tried to recreate the scene when we're using ballistics as a tool and experts from the ex-FBI. And we actually interviewed the people who was on that place, who see it on their own eyes, and we find the people who openly said that was a snipers, yes, but snipers was not from the police. Snipers was hired guns from the protester side. And this making this situation is completely different because this looked like a staged false flag operation just to bring attraction with the big media in the world and put everyone attention to this stage of Maidan. So this movie was a movie that called Maidan Massacre.
Okay.
It was a small film. It's on our Rumble channel. Everybody can see all 4 our films. And in 2021, after we finished and released Revealing Ukraine in 2019, and Ukraine was celebrating the Independence Day. It was 30 years of independence from Soviet Union. That's happened in 24 August of 2021. We did another documentary called Ukraine, 30 years of independence, the everlasting present. The everlasting present means nothing changed for these 30 years. Ukraine still facing exactly same problems what they face, and the division in society was much deeper. We interviewed the president Yushchenko, who was in another color revolution 2004. This is a good follow-up for Revealing Ukraine. But biggest analysis we done with Oliver in these 2 films, Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine. 2016, we work on a film a little bit less than 2.5 years, a little bit less than 3 years. And the Revealing Ukraine, we make it faster for like just 8 months in 2019. And all that films you can find in different platforms for free in a Rumble, still on YouTube but restricted. We also on Apple TV and Amazon. Why? Because we did it in 2016, 2019. Nobody can prohibit us. Nobody was censoring us. We was everywhere. We was quite a lot about, but with very little traction because we not advertise. And people was not such paying attention to this because Ukraine things happening in Ukraine. This is abroad. This is a far away. Now this far away can fly pretty fast here, and we can be in problem because of World War III. This is why I believe it's important to audience try to educate through historical perspective and political perspective. There's nobody in the Western media talking and covering this story in Ukraine as we do. And we're not pushing our narration. We're not saying this is only an absolute truth. No, this is an alternative vision on the conflict. If you believe in everything what's mainstream media pushing in your brain, this is okay. You were special people. You probably will wear a second mask and do another booster shot and vote for President Biden. And by the way, President Biden, this is a subject of our documentaries, both, because he was the vice president in the Obama administration when Ukraine happened, and he was responsible for everything what's happened in Ukraine. So you can see a lot of familiar faces in there, such as Victoria Nuland, who is now Under Secretary of State for Political Affairs, and she was Under Secretary of State for Eurasia at this time, and she was very much involved in everything that's happened in Ukraine. You remember that famous phone call intercepted to Victoria Nuland talked to United States ambassador in Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, and openly discussing the coup and whom to put in the position of the Prime Minister of Ukraine. It's all in the films, guys.
Yeah, and it's a history lesson that you need to watch at least the both of them. I'll have to rewatch. I think maybe I've seen excerpts of them because in one of your films you do mention your collaboration. There's I think a professor in the University of Ottawa who was able to do these trajectories of that where sniper shots came from and that. And
Ivan Kachanovsky, he is a great guy. He was in the probably only one scholar in the West who studied that Maidan massacre in details for 8 years, who published a lot of peer-reviewed articles in a scientific political publications, and he was suffered because of that. Ukrainians practically announced him a liar, and they seized his house of his parents in Ukraine and destroy it just to cause the pain to him. So this is how they know, and they call in the names everyone who is not following the constructed narration, what's Ukrainian propaganda, but dictated by our specialists of regime changing, constructed for them, and as well as all troublemakers in the world is in there, like George Soros and all the NGO, non-government organizations who help and who was a proxy for the CIA funding and regime change. And this is why I believe that Oliver know and help to make that important subject, because we see that all sides. I don't wanna describe all little important part of this mosaic.
And your film does that. That's the good thing. That I'm really hoping that if people are on the fence, they go, well, I know Putin's bad, but what happened, right? So, I urge everyone to watch these documentaries. I'll make links to all four. But I mean, for instance, for this history lesson, you interviewed Robert Perry, and he lays out this previous CIA destabilization of a nation. Do you want to just mention a little bit about Robert Perry, because he was very important?
Robert Perry, he was a great journalist. He first of all, Robert Perry, well known for blowing the story Iran-Contras, when the CIA financed through the drug dealings, through the selling drugs in the United States. They financed the operation in Nicaragua, arming the Nicaraguan rebels against the Sandinista regime. So there was a notoriously famous the Colonel North from CIA, and actually it's interesting that the John Kerry, Secretary of State at the time when we did our documentary, was also involved in investigation of this. He was a young member of Congress, and he made his position in Senate, and after that make his position in the as a head of State Department. And Robert Perry, yes, he is such a clever mind, bright. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2018, and he outlined everything, like all techniques, what they use, how CIA doing this before, and how they did it in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they immediately blame Russia and everything because they need to utilize the human anger, and they need a perfect villain. They need a perfect villain, as Putin himself tell us in Ukraine on Fire when we interview him in Moscow with Oliver in his suburban residence, Nova Agorela. He tells, it looked like the West need someone, a big villain, to make a discipline in the Western Alliance, like a NATO, etc. And Iran is not big enough, so they need me for that. So Putin understand that back in 2015.
Yeah. Yeah, and even Oliver Stone's interviews, people spoke about him in a condescending way. How dare you go interview that guy? When he said, I gained a respect for Putin because I didn't know anything about him, and I was just surprised how intelligent, how wise he was about the whole world, not just America versus Russia. When you hear Oliver Stone's 9-hour audio, you just say, wow, this guy is a lot smarter than I think. And well, we won't get everything, but it's like that. It's hard to cheer for him, like you go, Libya, Gaddafi. Well, I don't know about him. Or in Syria, right? And Saddam Hussein. These guys aren't maybe good guys, but then America goes in and the place is a shambles. It's a disaster after disaster.
Yes, Len, I'm very, very pleased to help Oliver with the Putin interview series. When we finished in Snowden and started doing this interview, I was on the set. And before that, I do a lot of arrangements to make it happen. And after that, I was a little bit involved in a editing process, helping to find the proper editors, etc. And that a critically important documentary of my dear master. And I proudly call myself a student of Oliver Stone because working for him with him for 8 years and understanding and studying from him all that art of the drama, and he's a great writer. He's an amazing writer. He's an amazing director, and he, as a director, he did a lot of interviews with different decision makers, and he's a little bit bored about somebody who has no story, no drama, no dramatic qualities in the character or the story. This is why he's interview people who has a lot of drama in their life, like Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez and Yasser Arafat or Lula or Putin or guy in Ukraine, Medvedchuk. So this is the quality of Oliver Stone, to tell the story what's touching everyone, and I believe he did like more than 40 presidents in his life, and it's important to understand the people, because everything what we know as Americans know about Putin was constructed and planted in the mainstream media by people who just come into their goals. And their goals is very simple. They want to sell more weapons to American government. For that reason, they need to scare. They need a perfect villain. They need use a tactic of divide and conquer, develop the tensions, after that, escalate the tension. And after that, when people scared, now they scared on a huge level, and all military industry, all industrial military complex clapping, they cheered. They very happy, because now nobody care about if it's realistic or not. Everybody like more money for weapons for war. And this is bad, because investment in a military industrial complex never benefit to the people. That's benefit only to that industries and to the big pockets of these guys. It's not investment in the roads, in a healthcare and education. It's not benefiting to society. This is worthless, you know.
Well, I guess 13 nations have now had to join NATO. So this total encroachment, when there was a handshake deal, say we will not go forward. Now they have just continued that when you join NATO, then you have to buy so many like jets, and you have to buy some tanks, and America is there pushing it on them.
Yes, and Putin's scared about that because he knows how decisions making in NATO. If any country joining NATO, country has no weight enough to decline the United States approach. This is why United States dominating the NATO, and they more and more start using their own tactics. And you know what's really scare me, and this is the crucial to understand why that military incursion of Russia happening right now in Ukraine. Because even with accepting the country to the member of NATO, what Ukraine was begging for quite years, but everybody understands this is impossible. But they give them that promise, not a promise, but they not close the door. They not shut the door and say, sorry, no, stay. You in the buffer zone. You the border state. If you accept you, NATO will face direct a border with Russia, and it's very bad because 1986. In Reykjavik, I believe, Mikhail Gorbachev suddenly proposed to Ronald Reagan dismantle the Warsaw Bloc, and he also proposed to him to destroy the nuclear weapons. Reagan was not ready for this. He said, "Oh, really? No, I cannot talk about bomb, but let's do this Warsaw Bloc." And Gorbachev asked him, "Did you will go exactly same way with NATO?" And Reagan promised him. And that was like a handshake deal because nobody, just interpreters, was in the room. So after that, of course, we all go in denial force and said, no, we never tell that. We never tell that. We never promised to Russia, do not expand NATO. And NATO was expanding to 14 countries up to the borders of Russia. Of course, and Russia was invaded numerous times, more than 18 times for the last 300 years. So this is in Russian blood. And the last biggest invasion was done by Nazi Germany in 1941. That cost Russians 27 million of military and civilian lives to fight back and to destroy the Nazi Germany. Don't forget, Russia paid such a high price in this war. Practically every family member in Russia have a personal counts, personal bills to the Nazi scam. For example, in my family, my mother, she lost the right arm when she was a 14-year-old girl, and they returned from evacuation from Turkmenia back to Ukraine. She just walked outside on a road, and she takes some metal, look like a pan, and she tried to unscrew it, and it blew up because it was a landmine ignition device in her hands. So I have my own personal not paid accounts to the Nazi. So this is explaining why talking about the Nazis and using Nazi symbols and using Nazi model and using openly praising the Nazi collaborators, making the all Russians sick to the stomach. They not tolerate it. And I believe this is how we all supposed to be. Unfortunately, we have a story of playing with fire. And playing with fire, and there is danger because the CIA used Nazi collaborators and the Bandera scam just to confront the Russia in the necessity of Cold War. So they was building the Nazi assets in Ukraine for 70 years. And finally, they're using them. And when in 2015, our Congress, they prohibited the Azov battalion and called them the organization, terroristic organization. So now the insignia of Azov, it's like a mirrored insignia of SS Waffen of Nazi Germany. It's everywhere, and we are actually supporting them. The CNN just aired the interview with a guy from Azov who was openly on the air and who begged for support and begged for the no-fly zone in Ukraine. This is everything what that happening now. You cannot call that. You cannot call that just the protection of Ukraine. You helping the Nazi to dominate Ukraine, to rule Ukraine, and to use Ukrainians as a human shields in the cities and to fight Russia until the last Ukrainian will be alive.
Yeah, your documentaries go through it in detail, so that's why people need to watch that. Um, but as you mentioned, this Nazi history in Western Ukraine, I think the problem boiled up this year is because provinces in the Donbass region, which are mostly Russian and were willing to take referendums to separate, they wanted to be recognized, and Putin finally said there has been a war against these guys for 8 years where about 14,000 people have been killed. Enough is enough. I'm going to go and protect them. And
Yeah.
then it's never sold like that. It's just an unprovoked invasion. And not one word about this civil war that's been going on, bombings and airstrikes and missile strikes. That just, when you start looking into it, it's it's just so shocking.
Well,
It's almost,
even
I'm all
yeah,
speechless.
it's even more worse because nobody telling that before in 2021, when Russia understanding what's going on, what the course of this action can lead to, and they understanding sooner or later Ukraine will consolidate all military power and go against Donbass in full force and use the military option, not obeying to Minsk Agreement 1, not implementing Minsk Agreement 2, just using military options as that was happened in Croatia. So they strike first, and they find all evidences what Ukrainian forces was on a preparation to attack Donbass and attack Crimea. And you know what? What's wrong with that? Because Crimea, as a joined peninsula, who was hundreds of years of history to be a Russian part, this is now the Russian province, and this Russian province has a nuclear weapon. So when Russia attacked, and if they losing on a battlefield, their nuclear posture allow them to use nuclear weapons if existence of Russia is threatened. So now the people who is complaining about all that casualties, trust me, I'm not a big fan of war. I'm against of every war that's happened. But can you imagine the nuclear war in Europe in the 2023 or 2024? And all the actions of Ukrainian government under Zelensky regime and the previous regime was just marching on this course, marching to the nuclear war with Russia. And they even start entertaining the idea to regain the nuclear status, nuclear capacity, because people maybe don't remember then until 1994, Ukraine was a nuclear state. They possess the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world after the Russia and the United States. It was at 400 something the ballistic missiles left on Ukrainian soil after Soviet Union collapse, and I believe 12 strategic bombers who carried that cruise missiles. And that was all giving Ukraine such a big nuclear capacity. Nobody in the world can allow the country or just emerging immediately be a nuclear state. So they give up that weapon and they signed a memorandum about this, and they was denuclearized in 2014. In 1994. In 1994, Ukraine stopped to be nuclear. In 2021, in a Munich Security Conference, President Zelensky told that the Budapest Memorandum doesn't work anymore, and that means he wants to regain the nuclear capacity. And they was entertaining this idea in Ukrainian parliament, especially they pleased Ukrainian Nazi. They thought, oh, how they have nuclear capacity, we will be unbeatable, nobody gonna touch us. So Putin just heard this word. He's mentioned this in his speech, and he's announcing this limited military operation against Ukrainian army and the Nazi, and called it demilitarization and denazification operation. And he tell that you tell the words, we hear them. So he openly said, we carefully listen what you're telling because you are on our borders, and you, if you will be nuclear state, we need to fight with you with a nuclear power, and this is a much bigger problem for entire world, much bigger problem. So everything was put in dust. He's not only fighting against Ukrainian Nazis, he's fighting for existence of Russia. And people who is living here in the West, they need to understand it. They need to understand what is going on, what is put in mind, because everything what was told to them by mainstream media have a totally different agenda, just to vilify him, just to make him the villain, bloody, evil force that has no mercy, and etc., etc. And I need to say also a few things about Russian strategy, because Russia was talking about security in Europe from 2007. The Putin in his Munich speech, he told, why you expanding NATO? He asked that question openly, why you approaching our borders? This is not about increasing of defending capacity. This is about offense. And if we will be attacked, we will fight back. And they don't care about the economy now. They know the question of existence. They can form the totally different alliance with the Eastern country, with China, who is a growing powerhouse, and all other countries who are looking at how United States, sorry to say, but diminishing. Our withdrawal from Afghanistan was a very clear sign that we're not going up, we're falling down. And all the countries in the Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia, when we try to vilify them as well, they choosing the now Russian side. Of course, China understanding if United States now will destroy the Russia by sanctions, the next target will be China. So we are forming the alliances. Our forces are pushing this, forming the new superpower alliance in a Eurasian continent. This is a little bit of big geopolitics, but it's still important.
Yeah, it is because you mentioned India and China. I mean, India is still trading with them. China is. Other countries are going to be forced to. I'm not kind of going in order here, but what I better ask you about is that now Russia is going to get off the American petrodollar, and they're selling oil with the ruble. So this means that they're just saying, okay, you're going to sanction us, Eastern Europe there, if you want to buy our oil, which I think they get about 40% of oil and gas.
And gas.
So
yes.
Now India is doing that. I think, I'm not sure if Turkey is, but China, these people are now going to have to buy, and the ruble is back up, where somehow Biden, and you know, when I heard that Biden's son was in on that deal, and he's on the board of directors of some big petrochemical company there, you know, and getting $80,000 a month for doing nothing, and then you find the guy has a real bad history, you don't have to get into that, but you go, oh my God, look at these sweetheart deals, we can give you foreign aid if you can give my son a job, that would be good, you know, it stinks. So that was my limited, you know, understanding of Ukraine before watching your documentaries, which the whole world flips upside down after you watch what you've presented. And you feel bad. I feel bad a bit because, geez, I thought I'm in tune with what's going around in the world, and I am out of tune. What's going on here? And like when I mentioned Robert Perry, some of these other guys in your documentaries, they kind of lay the groundwork of this is how bad it is. This is what's going on in the world. And now you're seeing it unfold in your own eyes, where every day, like you mentioned, some of these guys are calling for no-fly zones, and Americans need 80,000 people in there, and NATO should double that. And you know, what are they going to do? And your documentary outlines the history of Ukraine, this division between the West and the East, and that the people in, for instance, just talk about, you mentioned Crimea. They had a referendum. And some people were calling that fake. Do you want to discuss that? I mean, this is Russian people.
This was very simple. So to understand the Crimea situation, first of all, every lesson laying in the history. Because if you don't know the history, and unfortunately, especially American audience, they have very little knowledge about the history of this part of the world. And so Crimea was Russians for 100 years, the land when the famous Russian writer, for example, Leo Tolstoy, was fighting. He was an artillerist. He was in his military occupations. He was in artillery. He fighting in the Sevastopol city that was the bastion city fortress on a Crimea land in the 19th century. And in 20th century, suddenly that when Crimea was a part of Soviet Union, it practically was no border inside of the state. The Nikita Khrushchev, who was a leader of Communist Party and the president of Soviet Union, he decided to gift a Crimea to Ukraine. This is how Crimea to be part of Ukrainian Socialist Soviet Republic in 1956. And in 2014, when the coup d'etat happened in the Kiev and the Nazi-orientated regime come to the power, backed by the West, people of Crimea was scared of this. They don't want to live under this regime. And as an autonomous republic, they have a rights described in their constitution. They gather together and they make a referendum and they decide to cease from Ukraine and to join Russia. And this happened in March. And everybody who is talking about Russian aggression in Crimea, no, Russian troops do not come to Crimea. They were stationed there before because Russia has a big military base in Crimea and they have agreement with Ukraine, giving them a rent of this land for 100 years and allowing the Russian military and Navy force freely drive around the Crimea, be in any place. So when 2014 things happen, Russian troops just stand to protect the referendum from disruption. The future president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, was visiting Simferopol, and people were so angry on him, so he practically ran away. And it is even a video exists of this case running away out of Crimea. And after that, Crimea was a Russian part, very quick. And of course, immediate sanctions emerge, and immediate sanctions go against Russia. And they start calling this Russian aggression, unprovoked Russian aggression. And you know what the hypocrisy of this? Because the President Obama, who was superior for Joe Biden at this time, they talk with Putin. They even urge Ukrainians to not fight against Russia, do not provoke the war. They said, give up your weapon and just walk away. And Ukraine did. So this is how Crimea go. After that, of course, people in the eastern part of Ukraine who see how Crimea is walking away, they said, we're gonna walk exactly the same path. We don't want to live in a country under the Nazi regime. We don't want that people, Ukrainian nationalists, Ukrainian radicals, rule us, and they're gonna prohibit our language. They're gonna disrupt our way of life. We not agree with that government, and they also do the referendum. But Ukraine announced they call that anti-terroristical operation. This is the start of the war when 15,000 people was killed in this war. They saw in our films Ukrainian Fire and Revealing Ukraine, and all our dear audience who have the interest, what is the roots of this conflict, why Ukraine is so much complex problem than mainstream media try to present to you, find it on any possible platform and watch it and make decision yourself.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about this? That Russia? Did you hear that Russia's announced? I think by Friday that they're cutting everybody off. That you have to buy oil with the ruble. I mean, I'm almost. I think it's really clever, because.
Well, first of all, yeah, they doing the business in their way. If West, the Caesar of 300 billions of their gold and hard currency reserves, what was sitting in the European American banks, it's a half of Russian reserves. Everything else sitting in China and the gold. So, and they saying they prohibited Russian banks and cut that Russian banks from the financial system. Okay, so now if you want the Russian natural gas, Russian energy, Russian oil or Russian coal, and they thinking about to do exactly the same for the wheat. And don't forget, Russia and Ukraine was exporting like a 30% of producing and exporting 30% of all wheat in the world. So they said, yes, you want to buy our stuff, please use our currency. They have a right to do that. And if Europe already saying, no, we're not going to do, okay. So if you're not going to have this, sooner or later you will have no Russian energy. And you better prepare for that, because I understand there's a good idea to cut maybe nuclear plants in Germany, but probably Germany will return these nuclear plants back, and it will be still not enough energy for make that the homes in Germany heated by the winter. So This is a big disruption in the world economy, and of course every sanction is biting as well. Who people who implement the sanctions? So us. So we will see inflation, we will see food shortages, and they already promised us. The President Biden told his last trip to Europe, he said that will be people talking about food shortages, and they will be here soon. So and everybody see that on a gas station. We see that gas price on every gas station.
Yeah, but to me, I shake my head. I think in Vancouver, Canada, when the gas goes up, I said we're not getting Russian gas. We're not getting Russian oil. I mean, in Canada, it comes from Texas and Mexico and even in Alberta. I mean, I shake my head. How can the gas go up that much? So it kind of stinks to me of games being played by the IMF and even like what was hinted at in your documentary about the Wall Street,
there's a big business
paper.
all the time. They happy about the rising of price. They see huge demand on the energy, disrupted market, and this situation with Russia, of course, disrupt the market and price going up, and everybody feeling this on the gas station and feeling their wallet. This is not because of Putin do not export the oil. And Russia still exporting the natural gas to Europe, and they up to them to decide if they want to buy it or not. But practically is no or close to zero. Like 3% of Russian oil was exported to in all the consumption balance of oil in the United States. Russian oil count only for 3%. But look, the prices go up more than 3%, more than 15%. And it's getting bigger and bigger.
So that's what makes me think that I've got to learn more about this, because this is a real pyramid scam going on right in front of us. And just forget about the food. But then once the oil and the transportation goes up, then everything will go. I urge people to watch your documentaries just to get a good handle on what's going on there with Ukraine. As it's kind of I think Oliver called it the push button, that if they can cause Ukraine.
Yes, the United States do not care about Ukraine, do not care about Ukrainian economy, and practically do not care about Ukrainian lives. They want Ukraine just to do one thing, to fight Russia. And Ukrainians now perfectly brainwashed and staged to do that. When I look at President Zelensky and everybody who is clapping to his speeches to the parliaments around the world, from the Congress in the United States to the Knesset in Israel and to the parliament in Paris, I just see the good actor who's reading the lines, what was carefully written by the script writer, and he delivered his performance to squeeze the emotions. This is how Zelensky supposed to be perceived. He is not a statement, because a good statement, a good leader of the nation, never can lead his nation to the war. He wants to avoid this war to happen at all cost, because during the war, his people gonna be killed, and this is what now he's doing. With no military option and the nuclear deterrence force of Russia preventing any Western incursion in this situation, because nobody seriously want to confront the Russia in a direct confrontation, because it will be final confrontation. So there's the only option to Zelensky is to negotiate the proper peace deal with Russia and to obey to their demands. But he's not willing to do that. He's not willing to do so because he's a puppet. and his masters telling him, no, 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 we're going to help you, we're going to give you all weapons, just fight. Go and fight. You fighting very brave, you great fighters, amazing. You standing against such a powerful Russia, so good. And this is not about the standing against Russia so good. This is just because Russia don't want to cause a lot of civilian damage. They don't want to go in Kiev, they don't want to go in Kharkov. They want to destroy the military capacity of Ukraine. Yes, they want to destroy nationalist radicals who's killing Russian POV. That was a video was emerging like just a few days ago when Ukrainian Nazi torturing, shooting in the legs of Russian soldiers, and after that killing them in the cold blood. This is what this video giving the audience. It's very graphic. It's very violent. You know, in our film as well, is not so easy to digest because it's a film about the war, and of course, violence and the victims. This is a part of this story. But if we don't want this violence and this war on our streets, we need to do everything to stop this war there. And you know what? I can say what Adam Schiff was a very famous anti-Trumper here in California tell, we need to help Ukrainians to fight the war in Russia because we don't want to fight Russia there. So they're doing this openly. They openly doing this. And you know, we see the exactly same faces who was running Ukrainian coup d'etat, Victoria Nuland, Senator McCain, Sullivan, and Joe Biden, and others, Soros, and that people who was also spotted here in the United States from 2016 2020 when they construct that Russia Gate and they start spooking Americans with Russia, Putin stooge like Donald Trump. Because people, especially in the United States now, they understand that was all completely full, false narrative and lie because of political will to return to the power. Yeah, they did it exactly with same techniques what they use in Ukraine. So the Ukraine was like a testing site for their technology of brainwashing and manipulation the people to the social media through they carefully targeting and separating and marketing the all people habits and all people likes and they know that and they have access to that. We talk about this in Snowden because people give up the privacy completely to the government, and now government know what they're gonna like if you're gonna feed them this or that. So this is very, very dangerous thing because you see how the practically 95% of everything what Ukrainian propaganda machine doing was debunked in a 24 or 48 hours after. We see that this is an amazing level of false narrative, amazing level of attempt to manipulate an emotion, to make people made an emotional choice, not a clever, pragmatic mind choice. But emotional choice is all the time compromised because emotions compromise our ability to think clearly, to take all sides and all arguments to the consideration and make a right decision. All emotional decisions making, they practically wrong. And that's what they're doing with not only Ukrainian narrative, not only in Ukraine, when they prohibited all other TV channels only under the government channel. When they prohibited all the opposition party, this only party was pro Zelensky exists. This is how they want to clear the table. And if you repeat the seventh time the lie, as Goebbels said, that lie proceeds starting to be truth. Because even you have no any other option, and they're careful in this. They're skillful in this process. They do like a polyphonic way, little bit different here, little bit different here, but you have no alternative option. This is why our movie gaining such attraction, because we practically, after they cut off RT and cut off all Russian TV channels out of YouTube, how people living in the West can see the alternative version? There's no way. They all need to use the VPN service, and it's complicated. and they need to dig deep, and they don't know the language. So this is a very dangerous situation, because if you live in only one narrative on an air, so sooner or later people gonna believe in this, sorry to say, shit.
Talking about disinformation, there was a film that came out that seemed it was to counter you. It was called Winter on Fire, right?
Oh yeah, this is a I
Give me
know
a
about
comment
that
on
film.
that,
Yeah.
because it's almost humorous.
You know what? It's a humorous. This is a big joke, because first of all, the director of this film, he's Russian. He's Jewish guy whom I know personally. I invested in his film in 2009 when I just come 2008 when I just come to United States, and he screwed me. He fired me, don't pay me, and don't pay our investor. When all the situation happened in Ukraine, he jumped on this wagon as well. He come to Ukraine. He gathered a lot of footage from the local guys who was filming the Maidan, and he grabbed that hard drives with the footage and come back to States. He cut the film that nobody was care about. It's called "Pray for Ukraine." Returned back to Ukraine, screened it in the theater. Nobody cared, no traction. So he come back to States, and here the independent producers who has access to Netflix spotted him, and he say, "Listen, guy, we will give you little money to re-edit it," and they pick it up and they push and they pay for the promotion and advertisement. And Academy give them a nomination. That was not Academy awarded, but nomination was here. The poor guys from Ukraine come to Hollywood, come to Los Angeles to participate in Academy Awards. The director of the film, Evgeny Afanievsky, just switch off the phone and say that they're trying to sue him. They actually, because he's still, they film. And that film is a brutal propaganda, because that film do not discuss in the history of Ukraine, do not give in any backgrounds. They just mythologize the protesters on the street of Kiev during the Maidan. And this is dangerous, because they're not talking about no radicals, no Nazi, nothing. They're just talking about people who fighting for their freedom. They present it. This is a clear propaganda. This is not a story what's happening in Ukraine. This story has a lot of different sides, and you need to be careful, because if you start calling the Nazi guys freedom fighters, you're done. And that's exactly what Winter on Fire are doing. So yeah, this film, it's a big joke. I can tell that's a bunch of good movies about Ukraine. The Masks of the Revolutions by French cinematographer, and the people, and the film about Donbass, and we're gonna make the list of movies and make them public to promote understanding. But we still have two good pieces: Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine, touching this subject and covering them very, very much alternative to the mainstream media.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, in an interview, we can't get into the history, which you do so well. So I, again, have to urge people, just watch the documentary, make up your own mind, at least get up to speed. So when you see the news, so one-sided, I stand with Ukraine. Like I said, I ask people, oh, Eastern or Western, which part? And they look at me with eyes glazed over. Well, what do you mean? Is there something going on there? Since 2014, you didn't know civil war? You didn't know the bombing in the east? And it's not Russia attacking Donbass. It's Western Ukraine attacking them. And, so anyway, look we should wrap up. I thank you so much for your time. I had a quick question.
Thank you, Len.
About Kazakh.
Oh, yeah.
The history of Golden Man. Can you tell me, is that going to be released?
Yes.
Where can I watch it?
We worked 2 years on this film. This is about the heart of Eurasia, the Kazakhstan, the big land on the border of China and Russia, huge 9th territory in the world, and about the leader. And we interview him with Oliver Stone. His name Nursultan Nazarbayev. He was such a smart guy, and he tell the story of his country and history of Golden Men, the ancient mystic warriors who was living the 1,000-year before Christ and 3,000 years from now in the country, and how they was spreading the everything, the knowledge and the horseback riding and the technology from China to China, and how they shift and how they shifted and practically produced the Western civilization as we know it. This is a very interesting documentary. We have a future docu about this, 2 hours, and we have 8 episodes. We presented to the Rome Film Festival last October, and we're gonna make it available and licensed in May. So this is our new documentary. What's coming next? But now is a critical and important time that that war and the situation in Ukraine disrupt us from this release. We a little bit postponed it because when it is a war, everything was not related to the war, fog of war covering. So we take a little waiting time until the May, and we start releasing this in May of this year. It's also very good. I believe that's the best one.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to that, and I would be very interested to have you on to discuss that later. So you have the 4 films I should make links to. Is there anything then in the near future that you're working on about Ukraine right now?
Yes, we're working on the current one. We're working on the 5th. We're working on a movie what we call Ukraine Final Confrontation. This is about ongoing military situation, ongoing crisis, and ongoing reshifting the world order, because this is, I believe, this most important event happening after the World War II. Yeah, we're working on this, and thank you, Len, for inviting me to tell and to promote our films, tell a little bit to audience what we did and why we are thinking this is important to everyone. And even if it's not easy meal, do a little effort on you. If you're trying to understand, you will be probably, as a lot of audience, flip your vision on Ukrainian crisis 180 degree, because when you see what is really going on, you're probably going to change your mind. But it's up to you. We leave in this choice to our audience. This is why we're different. This is why we're alternative. We're not propaganda. You can call us propaganda of peace and sanity, because this is only 2 things what I wanted to propagate. Everything else is up to my audience.
Yeah. Well, it's a compelling story, and it just it reveals the complete disinformation campaign by the major media, just all of them in live saying the same thing, So, all right, we've done that. So, thank you very much. They are very good films. The graphics are very well done. It's very good editing. I mean, it's one of the most professional documentaries I've ever seen, both of them. I mean, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And you can buy them. You can still buy them. You're saying on well, do you have a website?
Yes, Amazon. No, we don't have exactly a website for the film, but it's available everywhere. It's available on Apple. It's available on Amazon, Tubi, Roku, and Plex, and YouTube, and Rumble, and we will make it available on Odyssey very soon. And so it's easy to find. Just type Ukrainian Fire documentary.
Yeah, I will make links in the show notes. But your company, is it called Golden Tree?
Our company called Global Tree Pictures.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
and a Tree of Life. This is our logo. Yeah.
Right. So, is there a website for that where people could check on what is new for your company?
We're using our YouTube channel and our Rambler channel, and we have presence in every possible media. We in the Telegram. We even thinking because our audience asking to establish the Patreon or Indiegogo or GoFund us, because people want to little bit to help us to keep working on this such an important topic. But probably now our YouTube channel with the Global Tree Pictures, this is the best source of information. We don't have something to tell in writing, but we have a lot of share in the video because we are filmmakers. We're doing films.
All right. Thank you so much again for sharing your time.
Thank you very much, Len. Thank you.
Very well.
And have a good day.
Okay.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Bye.